Welcome to the Freedom Podcast, and I'm here with Dave, who is in North Carolina.
Come
Dave,
on,
how are you?
team. Yeah, very good. Loving it. Love coming up here. Our kids absolutely love coming and seeing your kids. We love it as well. It's brilliant. Come on.
Dave, are you cuddling a pillow right now?
I am, mate. I've always done this. As Saz, like ever since I was a kid, I always, if there is a pillow on option,
You're a pillow cuddler.
I will always cuddle it. I don't know why. Yeah, always have.
Okay, nice. Bringing that to the Freedom Podcast today.
There you go. Yeah, it's probably some like deep fear, and I
rebuke that, Dave.
I'm
no
joking.
chance.
It's just a habit.
It's just a pillow. So yes, the kids are currently running around the house. They're playing with walkie-talkies. Some of them are watching a film. We don't know what's going to happen through this podcast. The mums, Saz and Rose, they've gone out and they're kind of doing an exercise class together, aren't they?
Yeah, we did ours yesterday, didn't we, Josh?
We did, yeah. I took Dave to a little kind of boxer size class, and he was throwing it into the bag and going for it.
I fell over.
It happens.
It was great.
He put a bit too much energy into a high kick, and ended up on his back. Same thing happened to me a few weeks ago.
It was good fun.
It was embarrassing.
Come on, I feel like that's a sign of friendship. If you're hanging out, your kids are running riot, but then also if you're going to exercise classes together, come on,
for sure.
The girls aren't doing what we were doing, boxing. They're doing ballet.
Yeah,
is it ballet?
It's called bar, so it's like based on some ballet movement.
Maybe we should go.
No, never. Rose has invited me to go.
Okay, poll on the podcast. Who thinks that Josh should go with Rose to a bar class, and this should be documented?
Apparently, it's a lot harder than it sounds.
Oh no, I can imagine. This is why I want to see you do it. Come on,
Rose
comment.
took a friend the other day, and she was like shaking after. So,
oh my goodness,
it's not for the faint-hearted.
See how
all those pliés, Dave.
I don't even know what that is.
I don't really know myself. But I think it's when you bend your knees and
Is it the one where your knees go out to the side or something?
Something like that. Yeah.
I spent 4 or 5 years taking my 2 eldest girls to ballet, and I still don't really understand what a plié is.
Wow. Okay. No, I haven't got any near as much experience as that. No, I'm just going on what I've heard from Rose and watching Billy Elliot. That's about it. Anyway,
there you go.
Dave, how's things going? Charleston, mate, courageous.
Absolutely brilliant.
Give us the news.
Yeah, no, it's honestly, things are going fantastic. It's been an amazing, particularly the season since the cave. Obviously, the cave was absolutely amazing for a lot of our churches all around the world. Amazing to see that happening, in regions all around the world. But the 12 or so weeks since then have just been absolutely fantastic. Really seeing our church grow in connection, in community, but also culture. We did our first ever series that kind of introduced some of the DNA. And it was just absolutely brilliant. Just such a reminder that what we have in the culture of our church is so special. It is unique, but it's also life-giving. Every single week, people were just kind of walking away like, oh my goodness, I can action this.
Awesome.
We had our first She events. We had our first Barbarians events. So yeah, lots going on. We are fully in the summer now. So obviously summer for lots of our locations can be, people are away, different things like that. And if you are in one of our locations, you're about to hit the summer, throw yourself in, help your pastors out, be engaged, don't switch off. But we're right in the summer months now. And so we're doing summer Sundays. And so we had one this past Sunday where we grilled out afterwards. The kids were raising money for our serve day, and it was fantastic. So yeah, lots of growth, numerically, culturally, relationally. And we are seeing obviously lots of people getting really impacted by God. This last Sunday I did your message from the Name Above All Names series, all about raising the banner, Jehovah Nissi, talked about raising hands. And I think, 96% of people raising their hands in the song, after the response, and many people never, ever having done that. So it's really powerful to see.
Brilliant.
We've had multiple messages from people saying, I've met that. Yeah. So, yeah. It's going great, man.
On. That is so good, mate. I love seeing what God's doing in Courageous Church. I love seeing how it's growing and the people that are being impacted and people who are coming and being transformed by these truths. So good. It
is amazing. There's so much stuff happening around the world. We're heading back to the UK in 2 weeks' time.
Yeah.
So excited to see. We're going to be in Freedom Hereford, and I mean, they've doubled this last year, which is insane. Amazing. Great stuff happening in Cheltenham. Excited for those guys in the fall. You guys as well. There's so much happening for our church around the world. It's is epic.
Definitely. And Dave, one of the things that you were talking about in Charleston and Courageous is that your impact there, part of it has been literally on your street and reaching your neighbours. And I thought this would be a great thing for us to talk about today.
Yeah.
It's about reaching where we live, because we've been doing a series in Raleigh called Streets of Gold, and all about bringing heaven to earth, and the fact that there's gold around us. There are precious people, valuable people that are living next door, maybe in the next apartment. And we've been speaking into this these last few weeks, and I know you've got a bit of a story really about how your own street has been impacted. And I remember when you first moved to Charleston, you were looking all over the place, weren't you? You
spent a nightmare.
Loads of houses, weeks and weeks of looking, and eventually you landed on this place that you felt, right, this is the spot for us.
Yeah, well, I mean, to be honest, really, we landed on the only option that was left in the end. We actually said no to our house. It was the second house we viewed on our first day of house hunting, and it didn't feel right. And it didn't, in the sense of the nature of the house, we knew we were going to have to do a lot of church stuff in the house itself. So we said no to it. And then it was over 2 months we didn't have a home. Kids were out of school, things like that. And we ended up back there. And I only mention that because in a funny way, when we ended up in the house, we were obviously grateful to get a house, but it felt like not God hadn't come through, but it wasn't the, oh, yes, oh my goodness, that's the miracle. It was actually the thing we'd said no to, the thing we'd spent 2 months avoiding. And yet it then turned out to be way more than we even asked or imagined. And I think there'll be some people like today, maybe you find yourself in a job you didn't want to be in, still a street, university hall. Maybe you're even going to a university that was your third choice, not your first choice. Right. And I think that's just a key point, because God moves us and positions us. And so, we ended up on Minim Street. And, Saz and I think we are by nature, we're sociable. And we were like, right, we're going to outreach. But also we had no one. We knew one couple, maybe two couples in the whole city, and they lived an hour away. Right. And so, we just got amongst it in our street and, started befriending our neighbours and started doing sorts of different things. Like we were like, right, let's grill out. So we started doing these once a month grill outs, and then there's a whole host of different things, from kind of like getting to know them, starting to do school runs with other families and different things like that. But now we can talk maybe some more of those details, but we've got, I think it's 5 families on our street, a part of Courageous Church.
Amazing.
And
wow,
2 of
5
them,
families.
5 families, yeah.
On one street. That is so cool. Talk about reaching where you live.
Yeah, it is amazing. It's amazing. And again, it was just kind of like one of those opportunities, it's a brand new community. Most people have moved in. And so it was kind of like an opportune moment. But again, I think there's a message in that, is that so often we're waiting for the opportunities, but they're often right there in front of us. But 5 families and honestly, a real range of stories. Charleston is still part of what some people call the Bible Belt. And so there can be a lot of assumptions that, everybody just wants to go to church and stuff like that. But I think 3 out of those 5 families were totally disengaged from church. Not 2 out of the 5 families totally disengaged, not looking for anything. 2 of the men got saved through that process, which was absolutely amazing.
Come on.
And then those families have brought families as well. And honestly, like a whole range of stories, some people in really hitting like the lowest point in their life, and others, thriving. So it's been great. And we believe in for more, but just 5 families on our street. They've been
fantastic, mate. What a brilliant inspiration and example for us all to think about how we can have that kind of impact upon the people that we live with thinking about that, Dave, and your experience. What would you say to people who maybe they don't even have any relationship with their neighbour at the moment? What would your advice be from your experience? Yeah,
I think firstly, no matter, some of us are going to have very frosty, cold people around us. And it's easy to assume that people don't want relationship, but it's such a deep human need.
Right.
And I think the first thing is people are looking for connection, whether they show you that initially or not.
Right.
And I think you got to start with that truth. We're wired for it. We're made for it. Some of our cultures are much more naturally open to that. Some of our cultures are look more closed. And so I think you just start there, relationship. What are some common factors? So my immediate next door neighbor, first day we pull up in the house, he's got his big ceramic grill out, the one that I want. But it's fine. He lets me use it. And I was like, okay, this guy clearly loves to grill, loves to cook. He's out there every day. And so just immediately, I think it was the first day I met him, I was like, hey, should we grill out sometime? And he's like, oh, yeah, let's do it. So it's what's his interest? What's his passion?
Yeah, right.
And how can I go to that? And I think the way you strike up relationships, interest, passions and needs, and actually going to them and meeting them in that place. And so I think within the first month, we did our first grill out. And I think we had like 30, 35 people from the other streets all there. And
awesome.
and the thing is that lots of the guys, we recognized 90% of the people on our street weren't from Charleston. They moved into city. They've got no friends. They've got no support network, and they've got no rhythm.
Right.
And so we now have an opportunity to be their friends, be their support network, and become part of their rhythm.
Yeah.
So, we started doing these grill outs, and then Saz was brilliant. She was like, let's do this once a month. So then it becomes part of your rhythm, it becomes part of your life. Right. It's actually, you start centering your life around it. And then, just trying to find different things. So, Saz started running with one of our neighbours, Abby. Only time they could do it was like 5 a.m. in the morning. Wow. So they start running.
That's commitment.
It is commitment. Other family across the road, their kids were going to same school as our, same elementary, primary school that our kids were going to. And they just had a baby. So Saz was like, before they asked, Saz went over, was like, hey, can I take Grayson in the morning for you? And sort of like, what? But it's friends, support network, and needs are just great ways to be authentic and build it. One of my neighbors, I don't know that he will listen to this, but I want to obviously be discreet. He sadly, he was married in a relationship that he was in broke down. And so after about 6 months of being in the street, we just didn't really see him, and he was very closed off and closed down. And then I was walking past one day, I saw him, and I said, are you okay? And he started sharing that his wife had left and things like that. And so I just said, hey man, come on, let's get a coffee. And he's like, I can only do 5:30 in the morning. So we just started doing walks at 5:30 in the morning with a coffee. Just being a space for him to share.
Nice.
And so again, I guess the reason I mentioned that is it's not always convenient.
Yeah.
It's like early hours. I have one of my neighbors rock up at our doorstep at 10:30 at night, having, had a few too many beers and needing to talk about something on their mind. And again, as Christians and as pastors, it is okay to have shut off time. Yeah. In fact, it's right. And we're not always available. But I think when you're moving into an area or you want to take ground in an area, there is a season of extra level effort. And if you can do that authentically without it being like night and day, like we're doing less now because we're in the rhythm of things, but that's how we deployed our time. And we were very fortunate that obviously what we're doing was church planting. But I think I've known a good few people with enough margin to do that, but they don't necessarily always have the mentality to do that. So I think it's like, if you have a fuller thing, you might not be able to take 5:30 walks with your neighbours in the morning. I get that, but finding ways to is key.
I think, I think about some relationships I've had with neighbours through the years, and some non-relationships as well. And I remember going and back in the UK when I was living there, and we had a neighbour move in next door, and thought, I'm going to welcome them to the neighbourhood and, try and build a connection or a relationship. And, knock on the door and say, hey, we've got a bottle of wine for you, just to say, hey, welcome to the neighbourhood. And it was like, she opened the door like 3 inches, just that kind of stood, like, left me at the door there, and then like kind of put her hand through the little gap and then took the wine and then kind of closed it and mumbled a thank you. And that was, I never saw her again the whole time we lived there. Some people are just closed off. But I think don't let that discourage you either.
Yeah.
You know, just because maybe you've got one person that is disinterested, don't then label your whole street like that. There'll be other people perhaps that are willing or are open to building relationship. And I think one of the things for me that I've been talking about to our church in this series is the fact that we can often give an offer to someone and say, hey, if you ever need this, and most people will not take you up on that offer.
Yeah.
It's that something about sometimes their pride, their awkwardness. They wouldn't want to say yes to like, hey, if you want help with this. So one of the things that I found is that if you just do something for someone, so like if you, I like baking bread, and so I took a loaf round to a new neighbour, and when I did that and gave it to them, and then I offered them, hey, if you need anything, they obviously see, no, I'm genuinely interested in helping you in your life, and there's already some kind of relationship. And then that person did ask something of me. Just, hey, when we're away, can you help us with our, bins and putting them on the road, and, just little things like that. And then ask me a couple of other things, but it starts to then build that relationship and that trust. And then the other thing that I really would highly recommend to people to start building relationships with your neighbours is ask them for things.
Yeah.
So sometimes, really you think, oh, well, I've offered and they haven't accepted. You go and knock on their door and say, hey, I'm fixing something and I need this tool. Have you got anything? Yeah. A lot of people generally have a disposition where they're going to. And I used the example in my message the other day where I was talking about the guy who has someone come, a traveller through the night, comes to stay at the house and they've got no food. So they then knock on their neighbour's door and is like, have you got any bread? And it's like, you've got to be bold and go and ask for something sometimes. And I found that that's helped create connection and relationship with some of the people that I've met over the years, is that when I am able to ask something, it almost crosses that boundary line where I'm not just, I can take care of myself, I don't need anyone.
Yeah.
To be like, hey, actually, I do need something from you. Can you help me? And when I do that, perhaps it makes it easier for them to also say, well, actually, really I need this. Yeah. Can you help me with this?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think one of the fundamental things that some of us need it more than others, but all of us as human beings like to be needed. And maybe particularly in certain cultures and with certain age demographics, the desire to be needed or to practically help. Yeah. Like particularly, I don't know, maybe we're talking about trying to reach an older male neighbour, well, I don't know, in Britain, right? This is massive stereotype, but, stereotypes sometimes have, value because they come from a majority picture of people. But maybe you're talking about an older gentleman. He's not going to sit there and say, let's have a coffee and talk about the deep things of my heart. But it's like, yeah, I've got I've got a grass trimmer or like a lawn mower. And I think one of the fortunate things, we weren't intentional with it, but now I look back as you say it, we were in need. We didn't have tools. We didn't have stuff. We didn't have the money to buy like a lawnmower, and actually I think in a funny way, we often, I think we probably pulled a lot of the social glue together, but our neighbours probably held us together. And again, there's balance. There's 5 families on our street. There's probably 25 houses on our street. So, some people are more receptive than other people, but that whole thing of being needed, I think is so helpful. It's so helpful.
Definitely. I think as well, it's trying to listen to your neighbours as well and what they care about. You talked a bit about this around passions and interests, but also about like, what are they thinking about at the moment? What are they struggling with? What's on their mind? What are they contemplating? I had a neighbour message me the other day saying, I'm dwelling on, like, I try not to think too much about the upcoming election, or I get worried. And it's like, that for me is an insight into what he cares about, what he's thinking about. It maybe enables me to speak in, to pray for that person. And so I think that we've almost got to, again, just be like good listeners, not just going with our own agenda, but like be like, okay, what's on your mind? What's on your heart? What are you dwelling on?
100%, mate. And I think one of the things that we have tried to be, and I know like Saz does it as well, but I've really tried to do, is that when somebody says something like that, I'll try and text them about it in the next. I even put notes in my phone and reminders in my phone to text so-and-so. And then I'll text them 10 days later, hey, how did that go? Or remembering that somebody says, oh, I've got a job interview coming up. And then you go back a week later, how did it go? And different things like that. Because I think that consciousness is when you go in with a question, you listen, and then you show them, I've been thinking about you. I've been remembering this for you. And, as a pastor, I think that it can be very challenging because part of our role as pastors is to be conscious of what's going on for so many people as we love our sheep and our, whatever. And so when you remember those little details, and even leading some of our other guys to do that has been really impactful. And we've seen people take some big next steps in church as well. But I also think with like listening to their need, I think one of the things I've heard a lot is people sometimes can fear or worry about trying to connect to a different demographic. So maybe you're a young family, you're on a street with older people. Maybe you're an older person and you've got a bunch of new young families. And I think it's just listening gives you the ability to find out, how can I serve that person? What's going on? Our street is predominantly younger families. Now we still have Taya's 5, but really similar for you guys. Our family's moving out from the dappies. So that's a combination of diapers and nappies. The dappies.
Moving out from the dappies.
Yeah, there we go. British American, Dave. We're moving out from the diaper nappy season of life, and we're moving into the teenage, preteen season of life.
So the other kind of dappies.
Exactly. Oh my God.
Dad points.
But I think that one of the cool things is because we've got so many young families where, even simple things like when we're grilling out, you've got like a couple on our street. 2 of them have got a 6-month-old and a 1-year-old. You remember this, Josh. Those are years when you never ate a hot meal as a father or mother of a young under 2-year-old because you've got a baby and then one running around here, and just assuming to be like, hey, let me hold the baby. Like go and go and get a burger. Those little things. Or like if you are in a street with older people and there's more anxiety,
right? Or
there's a storm coming in, or the weather's bad. We don't really get this here in North and South Carolina, but in the UK, it's going to get cold, like checking in on them. And one of the things that Saz is particularly good at, we haven't had a huge amount of like disposable income. So we can't just we haven't been able to just go and drop bucks on whatever. But if she's in a shop, if Saz is in a shop and there's something that was either really useful in a season, or maybe one of the neighbors has commented on, like, we've bought it and then taken it round. Everything from something to do, I mean, this might not be appropriate to suggest, but everything from like a kid's thing through to one of my neighbors was like, I really want to learn how to make cocktails. So I bought them a cocktail shaker. Maybe not the best thing.
Hey,
but
it might be a mocktail.
Hey, there you go, mocktail, right? But what I'm just saying is like, actually just, it's that consciousness. I'm listening to you. I'm thinking about you. I'm remembering you.
Yeah, for sure.
It does something.
We
very
had something
powerful.
similar. A neighbour of ours, asked to borrow our cast iron stove pot.
Yeah,
and she asked for it a few times, and then we just went and bought one.
Yeah, it's great.
And it's like bless them with it. And I think it's one of those things where if we're called to be like the Good Samaritan, you look at the Good Samaritan story, because that's the example that Jesus shows us about loving a neighbour.
Yeah.
Well, when was the last time you saw someone bloody in the street and had to take care of them? It's not
Very
really
rare.
Something that we run into on the day by day. But what we can do is show the generosity that the Good Samaritan shows. He uses his own resources to take care of the person, and then goes to the innkeeper, pays the bill, and then says, hey, whatever is not covered, put it on my tab and I'll pay it after. So there is this generosity that comes to love our neighbour. And I think that if we can show that same kind of generosity with our time,
100%.
with what we have, with our resources, I think that really blesses and speaks to people too.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, it's all about cumulative effect.
Yeah.
It's cumulative effect. And like I said, we both do church in a slightly more Christianized place than, say, where we've both been for years in Hereford and stuff like that. But even like for us, the friendships we had in Hereford, it was cumulative. It was just years of consistently being there and consistently being present. And I think even like through COVID, I know that I think it really yielded that when suddenly people were like, oh my goodness, I need, and it was often the Christians, I think, that turn around. And in so many communities it is, and that's what we should be known for. It's like, who do you turn to? Who do you go to? Well, it's those that represent Christ. But the other thing I think is that obviously, this isn't sort of, it is, but it's not just about being a good neighbor, is it? It's about hopefully wanting to reach our neighbors and see them come to know Jesus, or come back to Christ. And I think you've got to keep that in the back of your mind as well. It's like, we're not just here on our streets to be a good neighbor. And in fact, with some of my neighbors, I know that like there's been tension when even we've ended up veering into certain conversations. But and you can always, maybe I shouldn't talk about that but it's actually, no, we're here to preach the gospel. We're here to preach the gospel with our lives, with our words, with our actions. But I think what we're talking about here is talking about the process of building equity and building relationship, so that when you have the opportunity to invite someone, connect with someone, they're more receptive to it. And so again, like if you're in a campus, if you're Cheltenham right now, getting ready for like a big launch season, a shift of venue, get intentional with your neighbours. Like, what are you doing in July for the end of September? What are you doing in July for Christmas?
Yeah.
What are you doing in this moment for the strategic opportunity to invite in the next moment?
Absolutely. I love that, Dave. I think it's a great place to finish it. Is that ultimately we want to lead people towards Jesus. It's the greatest gift, the kindness that we can give someone. It's like, you might be a nice neighbor, but ultimately it's not going to change their life until it leads towards Christ. And I think whether that's you share the gospel, whether you share some of your testimony, and again, testimony doesn't have to be, I met Jesus when I was. It can just be like, this is how God is real to me in my week. This is what God did in my life 3 months ago. This is what God did in my life in the last year. And going into some of those interactions with like, carry your faith with you, and also go to the point of, we're actually going to invite that person along to church. Hey, I just want you to know I go to this church, and you would be so welcome to come with me and check it out sometime. It's changed my life, and I'd love for you to come and experience it. You should come check it out. Yeah,
100%, man. And again, there's going to be people that are like, oh my goodness, way more responsive. And there's going to be people that are going to take 10, 15 invites and, 20 opportunities. And, it's great to share about like my neighbors and 5 families. But it's like, when I think about my family, it's been 24 years of witnessing to my family, and I think that's another thing, is like, you just got to keep going, because you don't know the point at which it will change. And, if you feel like we're obviously in relatively new areas in our life. It's been a handful of years for us both. Maybe you've been in your city 20 years. Just keep going. Keep going. Try something new. Join a new club. Go to a new thing. Go to a different restaurant. Go to a different coffee shop. And try again and keep going with people. It's so good.
It's great stuff, Dave. Thanks.
Hey,
thanks
no worries.
For taking half an hour out of your little vacation.
This is great. Come on, team.
And it's great to be able to share some of this stuff. Now, we hope that this inspires you and just gets you thinking about who are the people that you can be praying for? Who are those neighbours that you can just be generous towards? Who are those that you can perhaps go and knock on their door and ask
help me out.
Ask for a tool in your next project. It always helps being a Brit in America. It's like, I've hardly got, I've left everything behind. And I need to help me out here. And these, amazing people that we've met through Neighbours. And I know that yours have been a big blessing. Mine have too. And we pray that you find some blessings that are around you too
100%.
as you kind of open up these relationships. Thanks for joining us
Come on,
the
team.
Freedom Podcast. We'll be back next week with another episode.